Hello and welcome. Welcome to my YouTube channel PharMaven. Today I will talk about autoclave qualification, how to represent autoclave qualification during a regulatory inspection. In injectable manufacturing, sterility assurance is of utmost importance and steam sterilizer or autoclave plays vital role. And each regulatory body will ask for your autoclave qualification. So when you are asked for the autoclave qualification, you may ask whether I should explain you the initial qualification or you want to see the last requalification. It is usual practice that they will see the last requalification. Why? Because your last requalification or latest requalification represents your current load patterns, current parameters. So when they ask for the autoclave validation, autoclave qualification document, you please bring the entire document, entire docket with you. Don't bring a single file, but please bring the entire documentation set. It can be 2 files, 3 files, based on how many load patterns you have, how many data you are generating during a requalification. Bring all the documents. Don't just come with a single summary report. It will give a negative impression to the auditors that we don't want to explain or we don't want to show all the data. So first bring all the files. It can be 2 files or it can be 10 files, but bring all the files to the audit room. Introduce yourself before you are going to explain, and you assure that only the subject matter expert, the person who are involved in the autoclave validation and the person who is operating the autoclave day to day, these two people should be there to explain. Then start with your summary report. So what you should tell first? You should tell that we have how many numbers of load patterns, how many sterilization cycle, for example high pressure, high vacuum cycle, leak test cycle, Bowie cycle. We have a certain list of cycles. Explain that we have this many cycles, we have this many load patterns. Then go with your critical load pattern first. It can be your filling assembly load, it can be your product contact parts load. Explain how you determine your load pattern, how you determine your number of thermocouples, how you determine your placement, and this what we can inform. Now I will discuss about how many questions or what are the most common questions which are asked by the inspector while they review the autoclave validation. So first question is usually, have you determined your cold spot in your autoclave chamber? So as a part of qualification, it is requirement that we have to determine cold spot within the chamber. Second question is, are you monitoring that cold spot during each requalification? So yes, it is a mandatory that the cold spot should be monitored during your each requalification. So once you, after your empty chamber, you determine the cold spot, and when you go for the loaded chamber study, you have to monitor that cold spot during the loaded chamber qualification also. Then next question comes is, how you determine your load patterns. So our load pattern determination practically comes from the aspect that how many items we will need. Then we have to categorize and define in a certain load pattern. For example, we have specific load pattern for the stoppers. Small, only 13 mm stoppers or small stoppers have a different load pattern. 20 mm stoppers have a different load pattern. Then we have load pattern for the filling assembly. If you have multiple lines and multiple filling lines, by meaning multiple filling lines, and if there's filling line has a separate filling assembly, then you have multiple filling assembly loads. Then you have your sanitization solution load. You have to sterilize, you have to sanitize your grade B areas, grade C areas. For that you need sterile load. Then here comes your garments. So these are the few specific general examples I am giving about the load pattern determination. So basis your load requirement, you define everything in your load patterns. When it is done, then you have to identify. Then next question comes is, how do you identify that out of my 20, 25 or 30 load items in load pattern, which items I have to keep thermocouples? So this comes from the 2-3 very specific assessment. One is the load item which is most difficult to penetrate by steam. For example, if you have silicone tubings inside a load pattern, So your silicone tubing with the longest length may be the difficult to penetrate. If you have filters, cartridge filters in your load pattern, then the cartridge filter with a bigger size can be your difficult to penetrate item. If you have vessels, bottles, then it is possible that it can the bottle cannot be penetrated by the steam, so it becomes your difficult to sterilize item. Then comes your load placement. So another question is, how do you define your load placement and how you ensure that it is followed in the routine? So load placement, we have to see that the heavier items into the load are kept at the bottom of the autoclave chamber or bottom of the cells. So as we know, autoclave comes with a trolley with different number of cells, maybe 2 cells, maybe 3 cells. So we should assure that heavy items are kept at lower shelf for ease of operators ergonomics. If you put heavy items on the top of the shelf, then it will be difficult for the operator to do that activity. Second part is to be considered about the condensate generation. If you place your, for example, high moisture taking items like garments and all that, or stoppers which contains very high amount of moisture, if you don't distribute it properly, what will happen? It will generate a lot of condensate, and your lowest self load items may not get proper steam exposure because a lot of condensate is falling on the load. So this is a frequent asked question, that how do you determine your load pattern arrangement. Next question comes is, what is your approach for the load pattern? For example, either we have fixed load patterns. Fixed load patterns means if I have 24 items in a load, every time I have to sterilize, I have to place all 24 load items into the load. Another approach is bracketing approach. Bracketing approach means we have minimum load pattern and maximum load pattern. So we have to qualify minimum load for a specific load pattern and maximum load pattern. In between that, we can have different items, or in between, for the routine, in between we can place the items which are falling between my minimum and maximum bracket. So this is how it defines the load pattern arrangement. In the variable like minimum and maximum, there are two approaches. One is to have fixed placement and one is to a variable placement. Fixed placement gives you will not give you flexibility of keeping load patterns anywhere, but it is a better approach because it reduces your number of sterilization load requirement. If you go with minimum maximum load and variable load arrangement, then you have to place the loads in different position and have to qualify each position. It will increase your number of load pattern requirement during the qualification. This is the next concern, that how you are defining your load pattern, how you are configuring your load pattern. So I will be making more video in this topic. Please stay with my channel, and if you like, you can subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for watching my video.